Good morning, fellas, and thank you once again, Steve, for bringing that hymn to us. Carl, your request. Steve is easy to get along with, so those requests, I think he'll field those for you. And if you ever have a hymn, I'm sure he'll listen to you. Also, Steve, Sandra and I were talking about the Bible study group the other day, and she was talking about Bill. She said, "Who is that guy that used to work for the city that is your point man on the Bible?" I go, "Well, you're talking about Bill Schweitzer, but really, Steve Schunig is now the point person because Bill is." And I went into the whole thing of North Dakota, and it was quite a good and long conversation. But Steve, just to acknowledge, thanks for assuming that role for us. I know a couple weeks ago I asked you to send an email out to everybody, and I appreciate that. We all appreciate it, so thank you. All righty, let's continue our study. We're in John 19. As Steve said earlier, we're hovering around Calvary. And the reason we are hovering is because John is hovering around Calvary. And this is a Bible study based on his gospel account. We're coming right down to the end of chapter 19. When we begin chapter 20, that's resurrection morning. But we have a ways to go first. And we've been looking at snippets of people's responses to the cross. And we're not finished yet. We'll be looking at that as will be this morning. I'm looking at this morning, named it What Faith Does. So it's a picture, it's a metaphor, it's a story of what faith can look like and what faith does look like and the dynamics of it. So this is an exploration of faith this morning, and it ties in directly with what we looked at last week. First of all, the text reads in verse 38, after these things, Joseph of Arimathea. Now, the things that are the things that were previous were the breaking of the guards coming out to break the legs, and the scriptural fulfillment, and the piercing of the side. That's what's right prior to this. So John says, after these things, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but a secret one, because he had fear of the Jews. But he came to Pilate and he requested that he might take away the body of Jesus, and Pilate granted him permission. So he came, he took away his body, and Nicodemus, who had first come to him by night, John chapter 3, also came that very time, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 litras weight. So they took the body of Jesus, they bound it in linen, wrapped with spices, as is the burial custom of the Jews. That's our text this morning. Last week, as I've already previously just slightly mentioned, John showed us in his gospel account that the cross reveals a kingdom that cannot be fractured. That was the key statement from last week. And I derived that from the fact that the guards came out and the guards stopped the other guard and said, "No, you can't break his leg. No bone of him shall be broken." And I'm taking that as a picture of the fact that God's kingdom cannot suffer fracture. And then it goes on and says how the scripture was fulfilled. The second piece is that life continues to flow even through human violence. And it says, they will look upon him whom they pierced. So there are two things that are true about the cross that are revealed in last week's study. God's kingdom cannot suffer fracture, and life and love continue to flow regardless of human violence and human violence. Love and life are not stopped at the cross. This morning, we move forward. We don't disjoint that from what's occurring, it's following. This morning's session, we see the truth of this kingdom expressed through human flesh. What is happening? We tend to think of the kingdom of God as an entity in itself, and the individuals within the story as individuals. But I'm proposing this morning that the kingdom is active within our characters this morning, as the kingdom is active within you and I on this session this morning. The kingdom cannot be fractured, and the kingdom's life and love continue to flow regardless. The cross not only reveals who God is, it reveals what God has done and is doing inside people. That is my premise this morning. The kingdom is active. So I am not teaching what we're going to be looking at as two good guys. They were good guys, but guys mustering up faith to do what they think is right. There's some truth to that, but that's not the motivation. As we will be seeing, there is something active inside of these two men, just like there is something alive and active in each one of us in this study. In Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, something deeper is at work. Faith is taking shape in real human lives. And it all ties in to the idea of what we saw in last week's picture, because God's kingdom cannot be fractured and life and love continue to flow. That's the idea. On one hand, nothing has changed, fellas. For example, Jesus is dead. Rome holds power. They're still in control. The religious leaders are satisfied with what they got. Jesus killed. The people are now preparing to remember God's great act of deliverance. There is a huge irony in that. The people are in preparation to celebrate God's release, God's freedom as exemplified through the Passover event, the Passover celebration. And the irony of that moment, that God's great release has just happened in history at this very moment. That is something to think about. But we know the story, fellas. We know what's going to happen in chapter 20. They don't. There is no resurrection. There is no empty tomb, and there's no visible hope. So what we're seeing as an act of faith is an act of faith without the promise of a greater fulfillment in their mind. They're just doing it because they're doing it. What follows is not driven by certainty of what will be, but because something within is active. That's the point. Something is going on inside of these men, forming what can be. And in that regard, we could look at this as referencing Jesus's teaching on the parable of the mustard seed that starts very small, but grows to something very large. We see right here mustard seed faith in motion. And this is true, and this is only true, because his kingdom cannot be fractured, and life and love continue to flow. I've said that about 5 times now because it's important. It's what God has and is doing. It has very little to do with these guys and their nobility, although they're noble men. John tells us Joseph has been a disciple, a secret disciple, and because he cites fear of reputation, fear of ostracization, just fear in general. And that detail is important. It matters. Faith does not instantly erase fear. If we carry the conception that faith should overcome our foibles at any given time in a dramatic way, I think we've got the wrong perception. Faith is integral. Faith is coming forward in a slow sense, and it's emerging out of a sense of fear. Formation often happens. We're talking about Christian formation. Formation happens quietly, out of sight, like a seed beneath the soil. It's alive. It's been planted there by one who is greater, God Almighty, who loves us. It's there and it's growing beneath the soil, out of sight. Joseph has been touched by Jesus somewhere along the lines. So is Nicodemus. And that encounter has been doing its work within him. There's something alive doing their work, doing the work. And it's because life happens. Life exists prior to you and I in our experience. God's kingdom is at work, moving us, engaging us, present with us. As Karl Barth said, God is with us, God is for us. And that is so true from this perspective. Now at the most awkward and risky moment ever, Jesus is dead. Faith breaks into light through Joseph approaching Pilate, no doubt in fear, no doubt of what it may cost him. But faith is coming forth out of the ground. It's not like he is bolstering up, although there is some truth to that. I don't want to dismiss that, but what I'm proposing is that there is something alive within him that is now breaking forth into daylight. And so here is what faith does. Joseph's request carries real cost. That's a given. By approaching Pilate, Joseph is publicly aligning himself with a condemned man. Not a popular thing. He risks his reputation, standing, and possibly worse. He doesn't know. But he takes that risk and he goes to Pilate and he wants the dead body of Jesus. Here, faith does not, to further the point, faith does not manufacture action. It's not through believing harder or trying human efforts to build it up, to work it up. Rather, faith reaches a point in this man's life where action becomes unavoidable. And guys, I think if we were to pause and think about our own lives, it is probably most likely true in each of our lives that there were times when you and I have felt taken over by something wonderfully larger and love in responding in a way that even surprised us. And I would guess that's been part of our experience. So we have a framework for this kind of interaction. It's breaking forth. So Joseph does not act to become more. He's not creating it. And this fellas, I can't overemphasize this, because within our human frameworks, we call them theories, that we take what we've been given, we take what we have in the scriptures and in church history, and we tend to want to create these theories, which is not, it's human. We're trying to create avenues of understanding. But within those avenues, the propensity is it turns a God action into my action. And that's a human issue. And it's not about Joseph mustering up anything. It's about him responding to what God has done and is doing. And right now, it's breaking the surface. It's like the fine plant coming out of the ground, because there's a greater factor involved. Joseph goes to Pilate, and this reveals something super essential about faith. By the way, we're gonna bring this down to some points at the end to look at. So I'll bring it all together and converge it. He does. Joseph. Now here's my little thing here. I wrote an extended point to make a point. So just bear with me. So because I am responding to what naturally happens through us being human. So bear with me. At this moment where Joseph could have responded quite differently, of which I'll cite, he does something, he goes to Pilate. But he does not argue. That's pretty much a lot of what we do. He does not protest. He does not try to change the circumstances or win his point, which is so common to us, me. He does not spiritualize the moment, which is common, or deny what has happened. So bear with me as I make my point. Rather, he responds to what is right in front of his nose. That is a huge step in formation. He responds to what is actually true. Jesus is dead. Joseph embraces this reality that Jesus is dead at great risk. He therefore takes the body down from the cross, assuming, I don't know the mechanics, or if he had help, I don't know, it doesn't state, but he took the body down. He took the body away, he wrapped it, he prepares it for burial, and this is what faith is doing at this moment. Faith is coming forth. In a world that has treated Jesus, here's my commentary on that. If in a world that has treated Jesus as disposable by the Roman government, by the Jewish leaders, Jesus is someone that we have to get rid of. Joseph treats the wounded body as sacred. Faith here takes the form of care, touch, and dignity. So if we want to know what faith can look like, it's right here. Faith is here taking the form of care, touch, and dignity. From Bill, we often hear the words orthopraxy, and a lot of times in contrast to orthodoxy, idea versus action. Here we see Bill, orthopraxy. This is faith in action. Or I would actually I'd say it's better, faith as action. Carl.
Now, this just reminds me, or is this where a lot of church tradition comes? in this sacred treatment of different things that have happened.
Well, I
It,
think, yes, I think it's a great observation, Carl. And in tandem with, especially in the Old Testament, the stones of testimony. And they would set these things up. And of course, Jesus carries that over, do this in remembrance of me. So, yes, this is so much a part of it.
I'll
And
be I'll
yeah,
be quiet now.
I think you nailed it on that one. Faith is embracing what has occurred, then responding to what is. So that's a follow-up comment. Faith is embracing what has occurred, Jesus is dead, then responding to that. I'll talk a little bit more. This is such a big deal in formation. Faith joins faith. Now we see Nicodemus. Remember, faith is alive. Faith is alive, active within Joseph of Arimathea. Faith is also active and alive in Nicodemus, and they're coming forth together for the same purpose, because faith gives way to faith. Life wants to emerge. Life is happening. Together they perform a quiet, compassionate act while the machinery of power, the Jewish power, the Roman power, and primarily the Jewish power, is preparing for religious obligation. They are in their world, but we see a different world operating right here on the screen. No one is applauding at this world. Attaboy, guys, no one. Nothing visibly changes. Yet, this may be the one of the most revealing moments in the entire gospel accounts. If we want to understand what faith can look like through you and I, we ought to rivet our attention on that image of two men, hopeless of future events, providing the care and the dignity to a human body, because out of something that is real inside of them. To demonstrate that faith happens because something greater, this is my point, that now about the sixth or seventh time, something greater is acting within them that is unseen. Faith is therefore alive, as we've talked. Faith is happening to us because of the reality of the kingdom and a creator who loves us. At some point within that process, it has to come forward. It has to be expressed, because it's not inaugurated by me. It is something in me that's happened. And I would guess, once again, every one of us has had experiences where we respond in a way because we are compelled to do so. That is out of compassion. Sometimes we're compelled to do things out of our own misconceptions. I fully understand that, and I'm guilty of that. But the contrary is true, that sometimes we respond out of mere compassion and love because something is alive within us. So faith is not something you and I muster up to force into action. It's not about a human mechanism. That, in my view, is where our thinking starts to move south. It is something I respond to that's alive within me. It's something alive within us that eventually takes form. And in this case, It's the simple care for a body. Now I'm going to, we'll summarize. Today we've looked at faith as, and I've got 4. These are review and a concise statement of the 4 ideas. First of all, faith is responding to what is already alive within. It's a recognition that there is something bigger, that I am safe and you are safe in whose God's nature is. And that and through the Spirit of the living God, which is in our presence, there is an activeness at this moment, and it's in me. I mean, to be biblical, this is the language of the New Testament. I am in Christ, and Christ is in me, and the same is true of you. It's not a separate thing that we call on in order to get called down from heaven. It is here. It is right here and right now. And faith is that belief. It's just the acceptance that it's here. It's here right now. And it's responding to what is already alive within them. So it's a response. Faith, secondly, includes the negative. And I'll explain that. Embracing what is actually real. Fellas, I have been in this situation numerous times, and you have too. Something strikes me wrong, and I reject it. So, especially in my Protestant, very conservative Protestant upbringing, that if something doesn't align with my understanding of what the Bible appears to be saying through my lenses, I reject it. Our way of, I was raised with the idea of embrace the truth and reject heresy. I was raised with that idea. I understand that. I have done it, and I have been on the receiving end of that, and it hurts. And it is so unfortunate, by its human nature, it's derived by human nature of rejection and separation, which is part of how we respond. On the contrary, faith is about including the negative. I may not agree. I don't have to say, hey, everything's cool. But by stepping forward and including the reality that's happening right in front of my nose, I can begin to change. In Alcoholics Anonymous, the first step, guys, is I am I am an alcoholic, or I am a user, and I need help. It's embracing the reality of what is. And fellas, in the religious sectors that we come out of, that is so hard to do. It's so much easier to just reject arm's length and in the name of God. And what that does is it cuts us off at the feet of growing, of moving forward into a reflection of who Jesus is. Including the negative is huge. Embracing what is actually real. I would rather numb it. I would rather ignore it. I would rather blame it. I would rather get angry than embrace it. Number 3, present faith is a present. Okay, faith is always present, but it's a gentleman. It's waiting. And it's waiting permission to step forward through expression. When Joseph came to Pilate, it was faith motivating him, and it was just waiting to come forth through permission. We grant the permission. If I'm stiff-arming, there is no permission. And I'm the one that suffers. If I may be afraid, I may disagree, but if I can at least include it into the formula, this is a reality I have to deal with, and I grant permission within that, it's a step forward. It's expressing. It may look like, hey, let's just sit down and talk about this. Number 4 is faith is small at first. Here's the mustard seed, but it tends towards growth because life seeks more life. I could say because that's what life is all about. So, okay, now this goes to the cross, fellas. I view the cross along with, you know, well within Christian orthodoxy that, what was I going to say? Tends towards, oh, okay, we get the idea that Jesus died on the cross to satisfy a need that God the Father has so we can be loved. That's very common in our tradition, very common. And so you get the idea that God and Satan, or this power, the power of Satan, are having this fight, and God finally wins. From my perception, that is thinking out of the kingdom of this world. That's how we think, because that's what's ahead. The greater power has power over the lesser power. And that is how we're trained. But Jesus frankly said, to Pilate, my kingdom is not of this world. And what it is happening is not a battle of a conquering, but a diffusion and a collapse of what evil is all about. Yes, there is a conquer, but it's not through a greater force. It's allowing it to exhaust. And when evil is exhausted, what's left is life. The cross is about revealing what is actually there, and that is life. And life is brought forth through the exhaustion and the collapse of evil. That, in a cosmic sense, is how I frame the cross. Not a greater power over a lesser power, and the devil's put in his place, but allowing the full exhaustion of what evil is about, which is nothing. I mean, it is something as we give it fuel, but what is left is life. Small at first. God is about life. I am come to give you life and to give it more abundant. And what's holding us back is our own constructs that we create that keep feeding sin, evil, and death. Jesus has freed us from that. So we also, I went way too long in item 4, but fellas, what are your thoughts on these 4 aspects of faith? Tell me what you're thinking or your questions.
I have no sense of being polite here. I want to be first in the buffet line. I need
we
Dave
kind of
Brown.
knew that, Bill.
Well, I need Dave Brown to correct me where I'm wrong here. But all this faith here is a Jewish faith, very Jewish. And the idea of a resurrection kind of arose in what they call the intertestamental period, or the Second Temple period. In the book of Maccabees, especially, they talk about resurrection. And remember, Martha comes up to Jesus and he says, Lazarus will live. And she goes, I know, in the resurrection. I get that. And so what they're doing here is the faith they have is not that Jesus is going to suddenly be resurrected in 3 days, but that he's going to be with everybody else resurrected to face judgment or reward someday in the future, and they're facing his body. So all this faith that's going on right now is a Jewish faith anticipating a resurrection. Now they're going to be surprised because he's going to be resurrected in 3 days. but they don't know that yet. But there's a whole concept of preparing the body for resurrection already present in what they're doing. So I don't think their faith is anticipation of Jesus being special. I think their faith is a Jewish expression of the resurrection.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And that it gives more color, more commentary on the slides. They very well could have been involved with a set process that would honor the body and the dignity and prepare for the resurrection, which I'm assuming is at some future date.
Right.
Right.
That's what I guess. That's what I think's going on, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we both agree that they didn't get a sneak preview of the Gospel of John. They don't know that on Sunday morning it's going to change.
Right.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And within that, they are operating out of something that is bigger than them because the kingdom cannot be fractured and life
Right.
continues to flow. That is true. So,
Yeah, they don't agree that he was. They don't agree that he was guilty of blasphemy. I mean, the Jewish leaders may have said that, but they disagree, and so they're preparing him for burial.
yeah, out of dignity and love for the deceased,
Yeah.
out of risk. Yeah. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for getting us started. Other comments, fellas?
I'd like to, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you,
Okay.
Tatsi.
Okay. I think I'm an example of that mustard seed. And the mustard seed were probably the biggest influence was my mom,
Yeah,
who always believed that I was going to be a believer, and all the other my other my brothers and my sister came to faith well ahead of me. Okay, and I came to faith, as you guys know, at age 51, and two of the things that were planted in me was my mom. It was probably the biggest seed. She always believed that I was going to become a believer, even when I went through how many years of in science and poo-pooing her thoughts on evolution and everything else that had to do with Christianity. Okay, but I bought the other one, a big seed is I married a wife who was a Christian, even though she married me with her friends telling me that you shouldn't be unequally yoked, kind of a thing, that concept. Okay, so my mustard seed was I had a faith in God, and I didn't express it when I was in science, but in science, as you know, most of them are either atheists or agnostics or whatever, and they poo-poo. They don't poo-poo, but they don't really respect Christianity very much as a belief. So anyway, my mustard seed was a faith in God. And then when I got fired, I that mustard seed started to grow. Okay. And also all along when I married Vicky, I actually uh, would go to Sunday school just to be compliant with her faith. Okay. So I had a mustard seed in there, but at age 51, that mustard seed actually grew into faith by being fired. Because uh, now I actually started to turn to a belief in Christianity. But I didn't, that mustard seed didn't come into fruition until I actually was baptized. And then I just became born again at that particular moment. And it was mostly precipitated not by being fired, but at the moment that I read the poem that I had written about my mom's faith in the airport of the Honolulu airport, that that mustard seed just exploded when I shared that before the congregation. So anyway, that's my story.
When you thank you, Tatsi. And so you're giving a live example of what we looked at this morning, that faith is present in Tatsi's life in the form of a mustard seed, but it grows to fruition over time. That's really the point of Jesus's of the parable of the mustard seed, and it's illustrative here within the text and in your life. What was it in your life, do you think, Tatsi, that caused that mustard seed to come forth, to move into, we could call it fruition, bloom?
Well, the biggest factor to me was actually the pastor who would meet and talk for a long time with me and just listen to my doubts and my questions and whatever. But he wouldn't preach at me, but he would just listen, okay?
Right.
And he wouldn't even comment that much on his faith and whatever. So I think that was a huge factor on me. But the biggest factor for me was when I was asked by the men's, not knowing me that I was not a Christian, okay, asked me to actually give a testimony. And I went home to my wife and I said, "What's a testimony?" Okay. So I got that. And when I did the sermon, I did it on agape love. And then I had a poem that I had written to my mom about her faith in the airport of Honolulu. She was long passed away, okay. But I broke down and cried, okay, in the middle of that so-called sermon, because I went home and asked my wife, what's a testimony? What is that? Anyway, I didn't know what that was. So anyway, I think that was a huge moment when I read that poem and uh, I I broke down and cried. Yeah. So I think that was a huge
Early,
moment.
early on, you mentioned the pastor, the interaction with the pastor, and how he didn't attempt to try to fill your head with lots of ideas, but he allowed you to speak and without judgment. And that in itself, I would, if we put it in an agricultural setting, that's cultivation.
Yeah.
Cultivation of the seed is removing the barriers so the seed can grow.
Well, he had other things. He actually asked me to teach one of the Sunday school classes when I wasn't even a believer.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going, what is
That's because he wasn't afraid that he would offend God.
yeah, yeah.
He was,
And
yeah,
so I
totally
taught that
different
class,
perspective.
and I would bring in all my questions, and I find out that these believers also had some of those questions, and we would discuss that. So
Yeah,
it was enlightening to me.
yeah. Well, Tatsu, we're all warmed by what you said this morning. That is really good stuff. Thank you. I know we got other comments too. We got some time, so.
Mike, and this goes back, several weeks, and you've brought it up this morning, the cross demonstrating a collapse of evil.
Yes.
And I've sort of struggled or tried to get my head wrapped around that. Um, I don't know why. I feel like I need to. Um, and where I'm going with this, I think sometimes sort of that collapse of evil, the collapsing, was sort of the collapse of, I guess you would call it the the linking of the Roman government along with Judaism and their take on theology and so on that resulted in the cross. Um, I think we see this sometimes, and I'm not sure, I don't really have an application of this, but the best that I can do to get my head around this is thinking of sort of when the Soviet system broke apart in 1989, 1990. In a sense, sort of, I look at that as sort of a collapse. And in various countries, or maybe when we moved into Iraq, um, empty palaces where the rich and famous and the powerful lived, and the lies that are maintained to keep yourself in power, and that sort of collapses. It gets exposed, and it doesn't have life. It's just a shell. Um,
Yeah.
and I sort of feel like your take on the cross and what happened there I- is sort of an expression of, well, that's sort of an expression of what happened at the cross. It When the lies are exposed, there is sort of a collapse. When the truth flows in where lies once were. And maybe that's where faith comes in then, that that puts seeds of life um, where the truth flows in. Um, it gives birth to something new. I don't know. It's just to me, it's sort of an illustration of what we're looking at in terms of the cross here.
Yeah. Well, Steve, thank you, and being honest in your grappling, and I we all appreciate that. When I use the term collapse or vanish or dissipation, that is really in sync. And I've got quotes from the church, from the patristic fathers. That is how the early church understood the cross, as a dissipation of the evil. And Jesus, through his example of no retribution, no retaliation, he entirely, as one of us, because he's part of us, he absorbed all of what evil, sin, and death could throw towards him, and it dissipated in energy. Just like your example of the Soviet government, there was no stronger force that overcame them. They collapsed internally in the 80s. And that's a really accurate picture. Well, then why did it collapse? Because of internal pressures, internal chaos, internal conflicts that caused it to self-destruct. And that is a way of thinking about the cross. And it would be there's nuances within an avenue of thinking, but that's one. A collapse of evil is what happened. Yeah. And we'll talk more, Steve. So anyway, Bill,
This,
and
I'm not going to spend much time here because it's getting short, but that picture's haunting me because I'm trying to grasp it within the Jewish context. And I realized there was a book out there I read a long time ago. I looked it up here. There was a Jewish Holocaust survivor named Viktor Frankl who came out
yeah,
and wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning.
Right.
And it's an incredibly powerful book, and
It is.
it applies even to Christians and stuff. But within that book, they said, here's a quote from it that everyone likes. It says, life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problems and to fulfill the task which it constantly sets for each individual. I
Right.
have to chew on that, but there's a lot to be learned within this context before we jump to the resurrection.
Um, yes. And that book right there is a life changer. And when I say embrace the negative or include the negative, that's exactly what Viktor Frankl is saying. He says we got to respond. We get to choose how to respond to what's right in front of our nose. Denial is not where you want to go. And that is a great book. It really is. Carl, you had a comment, and then we'll end.
I was just coming up on what you were just saying in our lives to take action, embrace the negative, not to be afraid of it, but to move forward into it,
Yeah.
no matter what. And I think that's so important as we come across tragic situations and we step into them rather than turning and moving away from them.
I agree. I tend to use the word embrace or include. I chose include because I don't want to give the point that, oh, no problem, I'll just embrace this negative thing that's real. I can't do that, but I can include it. So that's how I frame it. But you're making the point, exactly, making the point. Right now in our church, we're going through a very painful time. Our senior pastor was basically fired after 27 years by a well-meaning, good people, a council, and it is so common and what do you call it when you motivate it? Enticing to start to dig down and point fingers and try to locate blame of a very painful situation. And it is my stance, no, we need to embrace what has happened, include what has happened, but we don't go around pointing fingers because that just exasperates, that feeds evil. That just feeds it. Sure, we want to discern, we want to understand, we want to ask questions, but that is how I believe we move through in a healthy sense of a very painful time, including what has happened, but yet realizing that this is not the time to point fingers. It's the time to support and to love and to try to move together in understanding.
Could I ask what they fired him for?
Yeah, well, I don't really, it wasn't for any moral lapse or anything like that. I can't really speak for the council. I don't know, but it's basically, I think it'd be safe to say that our senior pastor was not performing the way that they thought he should be performing.
Oh, okay.
But they never said that's me, Totsi, and I don't know. But there's no moral failure or anything like that. So it's just it just blindsided us all. So anyway, fellas, I got to let you go. It's 4 minutes over, and we're gonna be together next week. And I think next week is our last time in chapter 19. But man, I've really had fun with this whole thing. And lingering where John lingers has just been, man, it's just like chewing on some really cool, really good food. So anyway, we'll see you next week. And bye for now.
Hey, Mike.
Right.
Mike,
Bye-bye.
have you seen that video by that Scottish pastor, the third man on the cross?
No.
Oh, you should look that up. It's an amazing chunk of a sermon about the third man on the cross. I think it would be a really good thing for our group here to see.
Alistair Begg.
I don't think, yeah, Alistair Begg, yeah. Alistair Begg and the third man on the cross, I think, is the title of it. It's called The Man on the Middle Cross. Thank you. Yes, the man.
It's,
on-
yeah,
That'd be cool. I'm up for, if one of you guys would prepare something, we could share that. If one of you want to take it on, that'd be cool. We could do
Steve
that.
might be able to help me out with that one.
Do you want me?
just go to Alistair Begg, Man on the Middle Cross.
Do you want me
And-
to send
and
a
it-
link in an email? I can just send a link if you want, if you guys want to see it.
I
Yeah,
think
a
it's
little
great.
bit of
I think
humor.
everybody- yeah.
Do that.
I'll
Oh,
do
you
that.
suggested,
you,
let's
Steve.
do it. Yeah. That sounds-
Yeah.
Okay.
So if Steve, if you could just let me know what your plans are and you're working behind the scenes, and I can alter and change and miss a week or whatever, no problem. So,
Oh, this is just a snippet. It's short.
Yeah.
oh, okay.
You'll all enjoy looking at it if you haven't. It's dynamic.
Oh, well,
It could take
um,
the place of the song in the morning.
yeah, we could do it then.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can do that if you'd rather than getting a link now. But Mike, next week is St. Patrick's. Do you want to do the
Oh.
breastplate
Oh, yeah.
instead of
I'll
us
do
doing
the-
a song?
I'll do the breastplate next week.
Okay.
So we may
Okay.
have we may have an altered, if you guys work on that middle cross and I do the breastplate, that may really inform what we do next week. So,
I'll send the link, and then you can take it from there, Mike.
oh,
In
you're
terms
gonna
of
send
whether
it
you
me?
want to incorporate the link into your message next week.
Okay,
Does that sound all right?
that sounds fine.
Right. Good.
Yeah, it's worth seeing twice anyway. So,
Okay, good.
Hey,
Thank you, guys.
bye-
Carl, thanks
bye now.
for picking up. We'll see you guys later. Bye for now.
Bye.
so long.